Here's the big question this show answers. How do we leverage technology and human science to positively impact our personal and professional life? The Tech Human Experience has the answer. Here's your host, Inc. 5000 tech founder, neuroscience junkie, and Navy SEAL wannabe, Javier Guerra.
Hello, tech humans. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is the Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer for a multi-billion-dollar retail and finance company, an accomplished cybersecurity strategist who has built comprehensive security programs for numerous organizations. In his spare time, he enjoys investing quality time with his wife and 10 kids. Please welcome Sean Walls. Appreciate your time today, Sean.
Yeah, thank you, Javier. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate you carving out some time to kind of have this discussion and then help the audience with some insights. So I'm going to start our discussion today with a statistic from Ponemon Institute. They revealed that 63% of businesses said they could not prevent cyber attacks because of insufficient in-house expertise. In your opinion, Sean, how can businesses tackle the skills gap in the cybersecurity landscape, really, to make sure that they're setting the organization up for success and really being able to handle the attack vectors that are coming at them?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And Javier, the challenge, the difficulty that you just kind of outlined there is real. I mean, I remember it would have been 2018, 2019. I was reading an article about the shortage in the cybersecurity space, and what they were projecting for a future shortage. And at the time, it was, like I said, 2019. I think we had a 1 million person shortage globally as far as skilled professionals in the cybersecurity space. And they projected that to be around 3.5 million, sometime around 2023, 2024. And, I'm living it. So I see this day in and day out. You have a business that's built around this. So you understand the shortage too. I mean, the skill gap is real. And there's no overcoming that. It's just a matter of trying to, develop a new generation of folks. And one of the best ways that the approaches that I take is to develop talent in-house. One thing I found about security is that, if you've got a really strong technical background in one area or multiple areas, you can usually take a person like that's got a strong technical background or technical acumen, and you can train them in security. And so I would say, the best way to overcome is to train and hire folks internally, folks that you have on your team. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's easy to hire a technologist, bring them on board, and then have them learn the company and so on. But there's added benefits, and I've done this numerous times already on my team and then previous teams that I've managed, where we take somebody from a different department or somebody that's been a technical guru for some time. And I like those folks that have that overarching sort of technical background. So not just a server person, not just a route switch person, not just a cloud person, but somebody that's had exposure to multiple areas or verticals within IT, and then teaching them the principles of controls, like because at the end of the day, we're trying to manage the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our systems, and so this really just boils down to risk management through control implementation, through people, through processes, and so on. And so we can teach those. A lot of those are finite to a large degree, meaning that there's from one framework to the next, or one compliance regulatory compliance framework to the next, they're the same. They're the focus on what they're protecting may change. So the controls are the same. The identity access management, the vulnerability management, risk management, patch management. I mean, all these programs within an overarching or comprehensive security program really are the same within any one of these frameworks. So you can train that stuff. And so having somebody on your team that knows the organization, that's been around for a while, could be a diamond in the rough, if you will, where you could actually look and grab one of those resources, convince them to come over to the dark side first. That's maybe the most difficult part. But once you convince them of that, then training them on how to protect various systems and apply controls with adequate coverage and strength and process rigor. I mean, those things can be trained, and somebody with a strong technical background would be would pick that stuff up very, very quickly. So that'd be my first piece of advice, I would say. And there's other ways to get around it. I mean, you can train folks that are already on your team. You need specialized skills in cloud, for example. You can train those folks, send them to training, or set them up with a mentor or a coach or something like that. You can hire the expertise. I mean, we can outsource it to a third party. We could hire, and that's the best part of the problem is that finding those skills are difficult, but we can outsource it to a third party contractor based on project work or staff aug, engaging your organization, for example. So there's ways to bridge that gap. And then I guess, if I was to kind of really dig deep and think about ways to do more with less, I guess, to get the skills on your team. But if you can't find the right resources and have a full complement to your team, you could look at investing in technologies that help improve efficiency. So it sort of gets you out of the tactical day-to-day continuously and pull you up into more of a strategic approach to security. So that gives you a bit more time to think about how you can further improve governance, improve efficiencies, and free up time for your existing resources, right? So and then then above and beyond that, we're gonna, at least for me, I've been in a continuous state of lack, we'll say, from a resource perspective, human resource perspective, for my entire CISO career. To be honest with you, always trying to fill the team. And as soon as I get the full team, then somebody quits or something happens, and we're back to square one. So at the end of the day, we're at a disadvantage. We're probably going to be there for another 10 years or so before we get a few batches of folks going through and completing this kind of training and developing that expertise and getting that experience. So in the meantime, investing in not just the people, but also the security is for a large part, at least historically, it's been all about preventing threats, trying to stop them at the door, not letting them get in. But at the end of the day, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you're going to get hacked. It's going to happen to you, and if you really have your eyes open and the lights turned on, you're going to see these at least attempts or these threats emerging on a daily, weekly if not daily basis. And so preparing for that inevitable thing, so developing the visibility, ensuring that you have lights on the right assets, looking at the right things, and seeing that threat develop in real time, so you can then have a mature process to respond and mitigate that risk or that threat before it becomes a business impacting event. So there's a lot of ways to kind of tackle this, but investing in your internal resources, who you have on within the organization, would be my first recommendation. You could also look at hiring people out of college and trying to train them, but I really, not to knock anybody from college or anything like that, but that's a difficult uphill battle, because you got somebody that's really green and trying to learn a very complicated, deep and dynamic industry. Just doing that in and of itself is difficult, let alone training them on specialized skills or security acumen and capabilities and so on is a challenge. So I recommend looking internally to see if you can pull some resources from other IT groups and train them. You could look at outsourcing. You could look at investing in tools, improving efficiency, and then just making sure that you have mature governance processes in place. So to respond to
there's so many. It's such a complex industry or sector that you're in. I would say that it's ever evolving, and the world's changing so fast now. It's really it's almost like you have to become a master at change, right? And so that's something that we are very focused on, is mastering change and proactively moving into the future. And a lot of the things you mentioned, I think, are really a lot in alignment with that. And from that perspective, if we talk about application security, how have you seen application security really evolve over the years since you've been embedded into the security realm?
Yeah, so I've been involved in application security Oh man, probably over 20 years now. I was back in the day when it was all based on a waterfall methodology, and you would go from sort of the conception phase through design, planning, coding, building, testing, and releasing. It would be like this sort of series of steps that you have to go through, and if you didn't get in front of that at the beginning, and build security into that, you were pretty much done at that point, because you would have to re-engineer an entire application, which could take months if not years to really accomplish. And so the nimbleness, I think, is one of the biggest things that's changed in application security. So we've got that true agile sort of approach, that CI/CD pipeline, that continuous integration and continuous deployment model now. So we no longer build the entire application and then release it in one mass release. We do it in increments. We get our minimum viable product, and once it's performing the function that we kind of intended for it, we can add the features and capabilities later, right? And we can add them in small bite-sized chunks continuously. And so what that does is that, first of all, allows us to come in and bake security into it during these release phases, right? So we can do it on a continuous basis. But I think the most important thing is that it allows us to really, there's a term in application security, it's called shifting left, and you've probably heard of that. And really what that means is so if you look at, and I'm not sure what direction my hands are going here, but if you look at it as far as a series of steps that you go through to develop, you go through that sort of conception phase, and you go through designing and planning and then coding and building and testing and releasing and so on. If we shift to the left, meaning if we're going from left to right, we shift at the beginning. Ideally, what you want to see is security embedded, or at least part of that conversation at the very beginning, at the design, the planning phase, so that we're thinking about security up front, and then baking security into that pipeline. So if you think about, before you actually, so back in the day, what you'd do is you'd build an application, you'd release it to production, and then you'd use DAST or dynamic application security testing tools to scan that application, maybe you do some system vulnerability scans as well, just to see if the operating system's got any vulnerabilities. And that was really, about it. And then some additional, more robust tools came out that allowed us to really manipulate the communication with the application, to do some fuzzing, to do a bunch of other interesting and cool things that allowed us to discover vulnerabilities that were that aren't known. For example, just the unique way that this application behaves, and so now what we have is the ability to embed in our CI/CD pipeline tools like SAS tools, which is a static application security testing tool. So it allows us to interrogate the code, to look at the code before we actually even release it to production. So we get ahead of that. We get in front of that before it actually gets into production. And SCA tools are another good example, like software composition analysis tools. So a lot of applications nowadays use libraries from open source type libraries and code snippets and a bunch of other things that save them time, make them more efficient, so they can then pull those tools in and or that code in and embed it right in the application. But what they don't realize a lot of times is there's small print in the for these public domain pieces of code that allow anybody to look at it. It means it's not your code; it's owned by the public. A lot of times, if you run applications on some of these codes, there's T's and C's that say your data now, so it belongs to it, whatever's running through that code. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we got to really be thinking about. But above and beyond that, you got to think that this stuff's coming from an untrusted source a lot of times. I mean, you get it from a trusted, location, we'll say, but the coder is somewhat ambiguous. We don't know who created this code. Maybe it's a crowdsourcing sort of group effort, and a lot of people sort of contributed to it. So is it secure? Does it have inherent vulnerabilities? So having these tools that allow us to position ourselves in that pipeline before we actually go and release to production is huge. I mean, I think that's a huge development. I would say another aspect or area of application security that's really changed over the say decade or two is cloud. Just the architecture of applications. Before it was like, you'd have your front end, you'd have your back end database, you'd have, in separate locations, one in a DMZ, one in internal network, maybe one in a separate trust zone, or however you design that. It was really just bare metal machines that, two or three in a tier that would talk to each other and divide and conquer as far as the workloads were concerned for that application. But now we're in the cloud, and it's a different thing altogether. We've got so many cool, innovative capabilities in the cloud, like microservices, the containers, serverless environments. Of course, APIs have been around for a while, but they're the heart to a large degree of modern day application development, right? The way that you kind of just develop a nugget of code, a core to your application, and then you have APIs going to all these different other locations, pulling in additional code or data or queries or whatever it happens to be. And so leveraging that, I mean, it builds amazing efficiency into how you develop and manage applications. And then above and beyond that, you've got a whole host of tools at your disposal. I just mentioned the SaaS and the SCA tools. You've got API gateways. You've got WAF. WAF's been around for a while, but now you can apply WAF to not just your application, but you can apply it to your APIs. You've got a ton of options.
It's never-ending sea of change.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Technology in general. That's why I say you mentioned earlier about people being used to the dynamic aspect of cybersecurity and technology in general, for that matter. I always tell people that if they're looking to get into cybersecurity or IT, for that matter, but cybersecurity is my focus, obviously. I tell them if you're the kind of person, because if your personality doesn't suit this type of work, you will hate it. It will absolutely drive you insane. Okay, so if you thrive on continuous change, continuous learning, nothing's ever the same, every day's different kind of thing, you'll love this career. If you are the kind of person that likes the same old routine day in and day out, then you might want to just choose a different path, for your career forward. So.
Yeah. It's something I really considered of getting some training in the space, because I understand a lot about human science, right? It just at a very deep level, and it just applies a lot to this realm. But I've kind of jumped on the AI large language model train, so to speak. So I'm kind of deep into that right now. But it applies. I mean, security applies to everything now. It's amazing about how complex it is and how fast it changes. But I'm going to introduce the topic of today's show. Right? We're already kind of deep into it.
Let me add one thing. So you hit on AI, and I think from an application security and just an application development perspective, the next big iteration, which we're already seeing, is people getting AI bots to actually develop their code for them. And we're seeing it all the time. We're seeing it, across the board, because it's obviously, if you give them the requirements, they can punch it into an AI bot and it can spit out code in like 30 seconds. That's something that would take you 30 hours, So it's crazy. Yeah. So knowing where your code's coming from and ensuring that it's secure is super important. So yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah. It's interesting to see how this is going to unfold. It's mind-boggling, right? And I always say that, I'm a type of person that's constantly looking for the most innovative practices and tools and methodologies, and being able to, be proactive in continuously evolving our company, TechHuman, and helping our clients to continuously evolve and get ahead of change, right? So that they can benefit from it versus being disrupted by it. But it's, for somebody like me, I'm like blown away by how fast it's moving and how powerful it is. The layman person, or just the person that's not really so deeply ingrained into technology like you and I are, I can't imagine what it's going to be like for them to just all of a sudden everything's just going to change. And it's changing so fast. It's mind-boggling.
I used to tour the country a few years ago with one of my previous employers, and I would go around doing talks on exactly what you're talking about, the emerging technologies and how it's going to disrupt society as a whole. And not just AI, but AI, virtual reality, augmented reality, quantum computing, IoT, nanotechnology. I mean, you just name it, robotics. I mean, and the thing about it is that all these different sort of disciplines and technologies are now starting to cross-pollinate with each other. And so, and so AI is combining with robots. Yeah, exactly. And so
together. Yeah.
And what we're going to see is I really, in the last year and a half or two, working with ChatGPT, and I'm sure you work with that quite a bit as well. The next year or two or three, based on what I'm seeing, is going to be unbelievable, dude. I'm telling you. Yeah. So
yeah, it's going to be absolutely insane. So yeah, so we're already deep into this conversation, but the topic for today's show is managing cybersecurity in an ever-evolving technology landscape. So we're already deep into the episode. We're diving into the challenges of application security, cloud migrations, and the management of risk around digital transformation efforts. Sean is already sharing, but will continue to share his experiences and valuable insights into navigating the complexities while adhering to compliance obligations. So, Sean, we've already talked about our interesting stat. We've talked about application security and kind of gone down some other rabbit holes because this is a very hot area right now, and it's going to continue to be hot into the future and continue to evolve at a rapid pace. But from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective, can you share any strategies or practices that will help businesses manage compliance more effectively and really like beyond just checking the boxes?
Okay. So there's an old saying that says compliance isn't security. And it's true. I mean, when I say that, what I mean is that just because a compliance, PCI, for example, or GLBA, or whatever it happens to be, HIPAA, where it tells you that you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to ensure compliance with a particular framework. They might be protecting health information or financial information or credit cards or whatever it happens to be. And the fact of the matter is really, I view compliance really more as the minimum bar. If you really want to do compliance right, it can be a tremendous vehicle, by the way, to get buy-in from the organization, to get support and that clout that you need in order to drive security priorities and initiatives. And so use it for what it is, and then bake it into your security program. So, meaning that, if you've got a standard that let's talk about compliance first. So you've got if you're a moderately to highly regulated organization, so you have more than two compliance frameworks that you have to comply with. What you want to do is you want to land on the lowest common denominator, and you want to crosswalk those compliance requirements. Meaning that if you got PCI, GLBA, and say SOX or something, Sarbanes-Oxley. If you have those three, what you want to do is you want to look for the common controls that cross all of them, and then find out what the strongest control is across those compliance frameworks, right? And land on that, make that your standard, or even better, because PCI, for example, in 3.2.1 of the DSS, 8-character passwords is the requirement for passwords, and that's moving to 14 characters. But 8 characters, I mean, that is. We should be beyond that at this point. And so the next iteration is kind of catching up. And so we're playing a little bit of catch up with compliance. We're for the next iteration 4.0 of the DSS, we're gonna require 14 characters as well as multi-factor authentication for access to the card data environment, which is great. We should have done that years ago. 8-character passwords just doesn't suffice. Just basic password spraying, or if you get a local admin, you can pull down a SAM file and then start pull down all the hashes and then do brute force against that. 8 characters is really easy, really quick to hack, or to crack. So managing compliance efficiently would be my first recommendation. You do that by getting one set of standards that meets all your compliance obligations in one fell swoop. And then also, number 2, I would say to go above and beyond the compliance obligation. So if it says for 8 characters, assess your own risk and understand your own organization and your control, or we'll say protection level objectives. What are your protection level objectives for this area? Identity access management in this case, talking about password length. Maybe it's longer than 8, so go higher. Okay, then now you've insulated yourself for a number of years, because when the regulation changes and goes to 12, you're already at 14, so you're good. That kind of thing. So I would say, go above and beyond. And I would say, when it comes to being efficient so if you're a highly regulated organization, the headaches and the challenges and the pain associated with continuously being audited, right? And so if you can bake some efficiencies into that process by, measuring once and using many, for example. So if you collect artifacts or evidence for one, control framework, archive that somewhere so you can reuse that later, maybe, or at least the process that you took to gather that information, those artifacts. There's GRC tools out there that you can leverage, so governance, risk, and compliance platforms. that allow you to automate and to collaborate around everything related to governance, risk, and compliance. So it has a built-in, risk register that allows you to identify your risk, calculate and measure your risk, develop, corrective action plans or ways to reduce or treat that risk, and then holds the stakeholders or the people responsible for executing against that plan accountable, and sends them automatic reminders. It's the same thing with the policies and managing those, and then compliance. Managing that entire compliance calendar and all the processes and the activities associated with compliance, and having that in one centralized location, making sure that all the resources that contribute to maintaining compliance are part of that process. Get automatic reminders, automatic task assignment, a common repository for gathering artifacts and sharing them with auditors and so on. So there's a lot of efficiencies you can get from tools as well, right? But my biggest piece of advice from a compliance perspective and how to make that not just checking a box is to bake it into your security program. Is to literally make, you've got your security program with all your different programs underneath it, bake compliance into it, and go above and beyond what compliance asks you to do.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's so important to be proactive now with the pace of change, right? And what we were just talking about with the advancements in large language models and the accessibility of all this technology and APIs and all these tools that are now at our fingertips, it's almost hard for us to comprehend what is the security threat landscape going to look like in 3 to 5 years, right? Because it's evolving so fast, and the bad actors have access to these tools as well. So they can turn these on for malicious purposes, right? Which then makes the protection of the organizations and just people in general, it makes it more challenging. Yeah, so it's interesting to see how this is going to play out.
Well, I think we're going to see, and if we're not already in it, we're going to see a technology arms race between threat actors and the red team versus the blue team, for example. So AI, threat agents, threat actors are already leveraging AI, and they have been for some time. It's to automate scans, to automate the discovery of high value targets, for example. We're not seeing it completely autonomous at this point. I mean, once they might be able to get a foothold in a system, and then they have to hand it off to a handler who then pivots, moves laterally, searches, scans the internal network, and goes looks for the crown jewels. But it's not that far away. And if it I wouldn't be surprised if it's already happening, to be honest with you. That where we've got fully autonomous AI attack bots, that are able to not only to basically, you just set the parameters and say, this is the target, this is the scope, this is the objective, and you're able to program it like that, and then it can go in there, it can discover the systems, it can find the vulnerabilities, it could get a foothold, it could identify high value targets, it could then go deep and wide into your network, pivot, move laterally, find the crown jewels, export them, in a matter of seconds, so
24/7.
Exactly. And so if threat actors and threat agents are operating at the speed of the wire, we need to be able to operate, because a human's never going to be able to. By the time you discover that happened, they're already gone. They've already taken what they came for, and they're out. So the human factor, is always going to play some role, but having AI fighting AI is what we're going to end up having, and we already have that to some degree, with EDR tools and deception technologies and network detection and response capabilities. Like, a lot of these already have AI and machine learning baked in them, and they have for a number of years, and it's actually coming to maturity at this point where these things are actually impressive at this point.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, and you mentioned the human component, right? And of course, as tech human, that's what we're about, is the human science component. And so anything technology centric or organizational, organization wide, but from a human error focus, right? We both know, and a lot of the listeners are going to know, that the vast majority of issues with having to do with cybersecurity is really coming from the human. It's a significant factor in cybersecurity breaches. In your opinion, how can companies really manage this risk, while they're moving to the cloud or just operating in general?
Okay. So specific, you want to talk about cloud, or you want to talk about just in general?
Let's talk about cloud. Yeah, let's focus on cloud.
So I would agree with you on that. Agree with you on your entire premise, as a matter of fact. So humans, can be either your biggest threat or your greatest ally, and and from a cloud perspective, the number one cause of cloud related breaches is the administrative error, accidentally spinning up an EC2 instance, for example, and having it exposed to the internet without any sort of controls, just accidentally. You didn't intend to do that. So I would say, one way to mitigate this is to, first of all, train. I've worked for a number of organizations who really, so some did good and some didn't, did that well and some didn't do it well, meaning that they didn't give the proper adequate training. And if you can't find the skills, you can't hire those skills, you need to develop them in-house. And so you got to get folks, if you're going to AWS or Google or Microsoft, wherever your cloud of choice is, make sure you have resources that are trained. They understand, the proper way to architect, the proper way to secure, the proper way to configure, the proper way to automate, and make sure that they go through proper training. And then as you're moving to the cloud, I think you need to plan. You need to plan. Not everything has to go to the cloud unless you have some business driver that says that you're going to be a cloud only organization, which within 5-10 years that'll be the case. That'll be standard. Everybody will be in the cloud probably. But right now it doesn't necessarily make financial or business sense to move everything to the cloud. And if you're going to be moving to the cloud, you got to understand why. What business value does that create for you or generate for you? Is it cost savings? Is it efficiency? Is it redundancy or resiliency, robustness of the system, the ability to auto scale, always on sort of capability? I mean, there's a number of reasons why you would want to go to the cloud. But if you're going to do it, you need to define what those reasons are. You need to have a business kind of plan as to what you're doing and why you're doing it. A lot of organizations, what they'll do is they'll just sort of decide one day, we're going to the cloud, okay. So they just start moving workloads to the cloud and just lifting and shifting. And that it really gains them nothing, except for moving from a CapEx to an OpEx model maybe, and that's about it. Apart from that, what benefit are you getting? And a lot of times that might even be more expensive to just lift and shift. If you already own the building and so on, why would you want to pay the additional licensing and service fees to a cloud provider? But other systems, if you move them to the cloud, okay, now you've got the ability to have auto scaling for CPU and for memory and for storage. You could have redundancy in different availability zones so that your application's up 99.999% of the time, right? So you reduce that downtime, which is a definite business value driver, for most organizations, especially in retail, and healthcare would be another good example. So think about why you're moving to the cloud. Get training for your teams. Make sure you think about plan why you're moving to the cloud and why you're not, and then I think one of the biggest pitfalls, in my opinion, from a cloud migration, has to do with with resource sprawling or cloud sprawl or whatever the term is. Back in the day it was server sprawl, but now we talk about it in terms of cloud sprawl, where you get anybody and everybody that is part of the organization gets an account in that cloud, and they have the ability to spin up workloads whenever they want, and sometimes they'll spin them up just for tests, and then they'll leave them up, and all of a sudden now you've got a machine that was used once sitting up and running and costing you money every single day that no longer needs to exist. It should have been turned down. So having standards and policies, good governance in place, is important. And so you need to have an authorization flow, we'll say. So you move a workload to the cloud, maybe you have an authority to operate process that says, okay, you first of all, you request that to move that resource, you move the resource, it gets reviewed from not only from an architecture perspective, from a standards perspective, but from a security perspective, make sure that the proper controls are in place, and then it gets signed off on and turned on. And then you can put frames, guardrails, we'll say, guardrails around the assets that you move to the cloud. And what this does is these are kind of hard-coded templates that you can leverage that say, okay, when you spin up an EC2 instance, for example, as in my previous example, you move it to the cloud, it's automatically no internet access, no access from the internet in, we'll say. That's the default. And in order to open that up, then we need to you need to go through a process to get approval for that and get that, get that port or that hole open in your firewall. So, there's a lot of things that, misconceptions or misunderstandings about cloud. Cloud isn't the cure-all. And if you're going to go to the cloud, align it with business. Understand why you're doing it. And define what that looks like, and understand the workloads that you're going to move to the cloud, why and how those are going to benefit the organization. And my last point would be that if you are going to move to the cloud, consider some of the applications and getting them to the point where they're cloud friendly. So the old school applications that I described earlier in our conversation, those aren't cloud friendly. They can't leverage microservices a lot of times, or serverless environments, or containers, or auto scaling of any sort. So if you're going to move a critical app, it might be worth your investment to actually decompile that application, rebuild it, re-architect it to be cloud friendly.
Yeah, it's so important. I love what you were saying about that, right? And we have we have some thought leadership that we've developed about really taking a step back and really looking at things very holistically, right? And you can apply this to a lot of different areas of pretty much everything, but really, if you're thinking about it from a cloud migration perspective or just strategy perspective, it's understanding looking at the overall organizational strategy. What is the business strategy, right? And then what is the sub strategy of the department, the team, whoever is going to be affected, or everyone that's going to be affected by the business decision, and then looking at that strategy and really, poking holes in it in a sense, right? And then really understanding the team that's going to be executing on it, the team that's going to be operating it, the team that's going to be leveraging it, right? And understanding that team culture, which is a subculture could be multiple subcultures of the organizational culture, and then their ability to really execute on it, leverage it, right? For the investment, for the change, look at, is there going to be added risk, or where is the risk maybe going to shift to, and really having a good understanding of that before you just go and make that decision to make that investment, right? And potentially increase risk or leave some holes that could put the organization in a bad spot, right? And then from there, that's going to help and really dictate the level of performance and the level of value that's going to come out of that business decision, and the team's performance in managing, implementing, utilizing, leveraging, whatever it may be. But it's so important that we don't just make rash decisions, and really do our best to leverage internal resources, but maybe outside resources of people that have been there, done that, peers, whatever you can leverage, to make sure that you're kind of covering your bases and maybe learning from other people's mistakes and their wisdom to then, move forward in a more strategic way.
That was well said. And I agree. I mean, moving to the cloud is a risky proposition. It needs to be thought out, needs to be planned, and 100% agree with everything you just said. So,
Sean, so, you of course are leading your division, your, cyber practice there, and you have to have robust security measures in place. How do you balance the need for those robust security measures with, your team's productivity, your department's productivity and efficiency? Can you give us some insights into how you balance that out?
Okay. So, I think if your team is efficient and productive, you're going, and they're focusing on the right things, and that would kind of be the definition of effective and efficient and productive. So I think that's step number one is recognizing that we need to be focusing on the right things, and a lot of times security teams, IT teams, just business teams in general, maybe spinning a lot of cycles on things that aren't important. And so really understanding, the business and what your critical controls are, what your critical assets are, and ensuring that there's at least a level of maturity associated with the controls that you have in place. And when I say maturity, for me, I look at maturity maybe a little differently than some people or most folks. I look at, from a control maturity perspective, that is, I look at coverage, so making sure that we have the controls in the right place, on the right assets, 100% of the time. Meaning, I'll give you an easy example. So, antivirus, you want antivirus on every server, every workstation, every endpoint in your environment. not 70% of them, not 80% of them, not 90, 100% of them. So make sure that you have the right coverage. And then of course, having the right strength is important too. And this one's a tough one because, at the end of the day, we want a secure environment. Of course we do. But, at what cost? When you start designing controls, you got to think that the stronger your control, the more friction that creates for the business, right? And so ensuring that you strike that right balance between the control strength that's effective enough to get the job done, to provide adequate levels of protection, but also nimble enough and flexible enough to allow the business to function. That's important. So having the coverage, having your strength, and then process rigor. That's a part of the technical controls that that folks often overlook. At the end of the day, we are managing these things. These tools, the governance, risk, and compliance aspects. There's an overarching sort of CMMI sort of process maturity that you have to have in place. And so having process rigor on how you manage those controls, how you provide assurance to the organization that the controls are actually doing what they were intended to do. Making some efforts, we'll say, to ensure that your controls are in the right place at the right strength with the proper oversight and governance will help your teams to run more effectively and more efficiently, right? And then you leverage additional capabilities like automation and so on to streamline your team. So the goal, the end goal, is really to become less tactical and more strategic. And so the more you can do that, the more you can shift your energy and your focus from tactical day to day, which is a requirement. But if you become more efficient and you automate and you streamline what you do and how you do it, and you have process rigor associated with how you manage your tools, okay, now you've got some free time. Maybe you free up a bit of time to start being more strategic and thinking about how you can do that even better and how you can, then you can engage in additional sort of, I wouldn't say less important, because this is important, but a lot of times, I'm thinking about threat hunting. Some of those novelty things that would be nice to do if we had the time, right? To go in there and actually just start combing through logs, looking for correlations, looking for indicators of compromise, and doing a deep dive and just trying to find those things that we didn't get alerted about or that flew under the radar type of thing. So when you start becoming more strategic through efficient processes and automation and so on, then you have the opportunity to become more strategic. And when you're more strategic, then you have the opportunity to become more strategic because you free up more time. And so it's kind of a vicious circle. Yeah, and it could be also in the opposite direction. So just like the northern hemisphere spins one way in the toilet and the southern hemisphere the other, well, same thing. We can go spiral up and become more strategic and be more efficient, or we can spiral down and become more tactical and less efficient. So it requires defining what your security program looks like. And a lot of this documentation, a lot of this governance, the governance aspects of security, a lot of times are overlooked by most organizations because they get caught up in the weeds and they just don't have time to write proper policies or develop proper standards or to document their processes, to write run books and develop plans for incident response, for risk management, and whatever other parts of security you should be focusing on. And so getting those ducks in a row really go a long way to improving the productivity and the efficiency of your team, while at the same time ensuring that that you're protecting the right assets at the right level, with the right level of coverage and so on. So that's what I would say. I mean, we can go on we could have a whole podcast just on this topic, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I've got to say something here, and I'm going to do my best not to self-promote, but I've got to say it. And so, from the human science component, right? If you think about it from a marketing analogy, when you're communicating something to the market, you don't want to, what Donald Miller would say is, you don't want to make people burn brain calories, right? And so if we can create an environment, a cyber team, a department, whatever that is automating where you can automate with those baked in security controls, right? So like you said, free up time, which is a very valuable resource now because businesses increase in demands, they're cutting budgets, they're expecting more with less, right? And so what we believe is that human science component is where is a fairly untapped resource, right? And so we actually have a meeting on Monday with an energy company, and I don't want to say too much, but ultimately it's to plug in some sort of a technology that is literally eliminating if they were to plug this in, it would basically eliminate the ability for some phishing attacks, because it eliminates the need for a password in certain situations. And it also eliminates the ability for people to duplicate some sort of an access vector, right? Because it's tied in through biometrics. And so just thinking about things strategically like that is, we know that human error is the vast 95 to 97% of all security breaches. Well, what can we implement that would eliminate that the ability for a human to make an error, because humans are inherently flawed in some way, shape, or form, right? So, but these new technologies are starting to come out, and we can start to kind of shave off and move the needle in the right direction, and then potentially free up some time, minimize the worry, the fear, and put those resources on a more strategic approach to then continuously increase operational efficiencies and reduce potential risk of certain attack vectors, stuff like that. So it's a crazy dynamic space, and it's just it's fascinating to me about how that you working for such a large organization, like you have all of this under your responsibility, and it's just so fast and moving and dynamic. It's
overwhelming. If you've ever taken a look online at the CISO responsibilities spider matrix, I don't know if you've ever seen that. Google it at some point. It just was a spider map or mind map of the CISO's responsibilities, and it branches off. And like once you expand all the branches and you look at the CISOs in the middle, there's all the domains of responsibility and all the different responsibilities under each domain. It's an eye chart. It's unbelievable how many different areas that we're involved with. Most IT groups, they have they're siloed to some degree. So you've got the server team, you've got the endpoint team, the application team, you've got cloud team or whatever. Where security is that umbrella over everything. Not only are we securing every single technology listed there and others, we're also securing the business. We're securing the people, we're securing the business processes, we're ensuring that the data is being shared with only those who should have, maintaining privacy, sharing data only with those who have authorization to see that data. And so it goes right from everything from cybersecurity insurance to vendor risk management to securing every single type of technology that the organization has. To compliance, to privacy, it's just unbelievable. And didn't mean to go off on a rant there, but that is the story of my life.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is, and it's not going to slow down. It's just going to continue to get more and more complex, and it's it's something that we kind of focus on, as we call cyber culture, right? Is that cyber culture needs to be ingrained throughout the entire organization, because it's just so important, and it's a growing threat that everybody in the entire organization needs to be aware of and needs to work together to make sure that everybody's moving together in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge proponent of developing a mature security awareness and training program, ensuring that folks understand, so that folks are aware not only what not to do, but what to do and how to engage security, how to recognize a threat and engage security, and be our eyes on the ground, and boots on the ground to see things developing in real time. And then they go from being your biggest threat to a human firewall, like I said. So having a robust security awareness program is huge. Yeah. And I agree with your point earlier that you said almost all breaches have some sort of social engineering or human component to it. 100% true. So if you want to invest somewhere, invest in people, invest in training people, invest in security awareness, and so on.
And it's tough because humans inherently they're adverse to change. They don't like to change, and it's really a behavioral change a lot of the time, if not all of the time, but it takes time, and I've learned this the hard way through my own transformation from childhood through adulthood, and kind of changing myself and transforming myself and behaviors and all this kind of stuff. But ultimately, a lot of the training that I've received as well is I understand that at a very deep level, from neuroscience, from coaching methodologies, everything. It takes time, and it's people have to hear things so many times for it to sink in. But then once they understand it, they then have to change the behaviors, which is very difficult to do. And so it's a huge space that is extremely important, because things are changing and we need to stay ahead of the curve for sure, or at least do our best.
You hit on a few very good points there. So security awareness training is not just that once a year sort of training that you go through. It's a continuous multimodal sort of approach that's just drives that the message home and keeps it top of mind continuously. And so video training and, notices, newsletters, continuous alerts. If you see threats, notifying folks, rewarding folks for reporting a phishing email or something suspicious, gamifying your learning endeavors, simulated phishing attacks, and just, multiple aspects of methods or vehicles or ways to learn and drilling it continuously. And then one way to really kind of drive it home that I found works really well is making it relevant, making it personal. So when we talk about the security of our organization and the things that they should do to protect the organization, we'll tie it back to their bank account, their credit card information, their online shopping, they're securing their kids online. And if you draw a correlation there, and it gives them some sort of anchor in their own personal life, and it becomes relevant to them, then a light bulb goes off, is what I find,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everybody lives in their own little universe, I like to say, and it really has to apply to them.
It's very abstract otherwise.
They'll externalize it, and, the brain wants to shut it aside and be efficient and focus on what they care about most. So, yeah, that's huge. So Sean, we're coming up on closing here. What, in your opinion, what technology does the world need that does not exist yet?
There's a lot of technologies. You could think about truly cheap, affordable, renewable energy. We could talk. We go all day talking about that. That's top of mind. But if I talk about it from a security perspective, I would say what I'm hoping that comes about in the next, say, 5 years or so is that we develop AI to the point where you've got sort of a hive, an AI hive, where you've got a centralized platform, kind of an XDR sort of home base, and then agents on every single system within the environment. And then these AI bots are smart enough to learn your environment, understand what is normal, what's not normal, and what are your high value targets, which ones aren't. But more importantly, that they understand and they communicate in real time amongst the hive. We'll say, we're just calling it a hive just for illustration purposes. But so if a bot sees something happening, it immediately the entire hive knows about it, and it monitors and correlates any sort of a attack vector or development of a threat, and then has enough intelligence also above and beyond that to be able to dissect and understand what the kill chain is. And when I say kill chain, I'm talking about the steps or the phases that a cyber threat or attack vector goes through in order to actually achieve its objective. And if it can understand that and anticipate what that is, it can then kill it in real time. And so we have some of those technologies now. We have some of these autonomous systems and their ability to respond autonomously. The problem that we have today is that they're just not smart enough. They're wrong too often, and people are hesitant to turn them into autonomous response mode. So we're not blocking things a lot of times, even in our IPSs, because we block the wrong thing. If we don't invest in tuning the IPS properly, it may inadvertently block legitimate traffic. The same thing with certain network detection and response platforms that look at your environment and understand what's normal, and then statistically tell you that this is a deviation from normal, and it's 90% sure that it's malicious, but it's wrong a lot of the times. And so we don't turn on that automated capability, and having a tool that does that, I think, would be a game changer for cybersecurity. And of course, the threat actors will come up with another tool that circumvents that. But if we can get an AI tool that that does that is multi-agent based and operates in a hive type network, learns your environment just automatically, and then has enough intelligence to dissect to see an attack developing or a threat developing, and then knows enough to sort of anticipate what that threat's going to look like, what the next step's going to be, what the next target's going to be, what the next attack vector is going to be, and then kills that in real time with 100% accuracy or fidelity, we'll say. I think that would be huge, and we're not that far from that. I'd say we're a few years off. I went to Gartner this year, and everything that they talked about was all AI. It was just that was the core of the message there this year, and I anticipate that's going to be the case probably for 5-10 years to come. I mean, AI is going to change everything. So is quantum computing and so on. But
it's going to be huge. Yeah. Just hopefully that they can figure out a way to kind of embed the ethics and the safety into those systems so they don't just like go and do their own thing, so to speak.
Yeah, and
It's an interesting space for sure.
yeah, that's concerning, and yeah, it's a whole different topic. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. There has to be some sort of regulation, but who regulates it? And because then if you get the wrong people regulating that kind of technology, you might be worse off than you were before. Just let the market develop it. I don't know. Is that, we don't know what the best path forward is, but it's certainly an uncertain path and a dangerous path and a risky path, and but it's also exciting and revolutionary at the same time.
Perfect. All right, Sean, really appreciate your time today. Listeners, be sure to check out Sean's work and follow him on social media. Website links and social handles will be in the show description. Before we go, Sean, is there any advice that you could give the audience, any kind of a tip or word of advice to help them that they could really kind of take action on right now to, move the needle maybe in their security career?
For people to move the needle in their security career?
Just from what we talked about, just whatever you can think of, whatever's coming to mind for you. Let's not limit it to what I said. Whatever you can think about, just some sort of actionable advice that you can give the audience.
Yeah, I think the most useful advice I would give somebody about cybersecurity in general is that it's not just technology. And, the old school way of thinking, back 15, 20, 25 years ago was really that cybersecurity, or it wasn't even called that back then, just information security, is a technology, and it's a firewall and antivirus back in the 90s, we'll say. And then it evolved from there, and you have more tools and so on. But at the end of the day, it's all about, people following processes and leveraging technology. And so invest in your people. That would be my advice, is invest in your people, define your processes, and ensure that, and this will ensure that you're getting the best out of your tools, I would say. And so train, coach, practice, develop career pathing. After all said and done, security is it's about people following processes and leveraging technologies to manage risk at a level that's commensurate with the business's risk appetite, and just don't forget that human component. I mean, we're always going to have that as part of cybersecurity. You need those eyes on glass. You need that expertise. You need that experience. Unless AI takes over and we're all out of jobs, but you never know. But invest in your people is what I would say. And security is not just a technology. It's people driving those technologies to positive business outcomes.
Yeah, love it. Definitely in alignment with our beliefs, and it's going to be interesting to see the future unfold. And, hopefully Skynet, or should I say Starlink, doesn't take over, right? So audience, don't forget to help your fellow tech humans. Share this podcast and follow me on LinkedIn at Javier Guerra 360. Sean, thanks again for your time. Really appreciate all your insights, and, looking forward to continuing the conversation in the future. Audience, have a great day. See you next time on the Tech Human Experience.
The Tech Human Experience